For 50 years, whenever danger arrived at the Persian Gulf, the phone call went to Washington. This morning, for the first time in half a century, it did not. The call went to Riyadh instead, and every Gulf state that received it answered immediately, without hesitation, without consulting the United States first, and without any intention of asking for American permission for what they had already decided to do. What emerged from that call, formalized in an emergency session of Gulf security ministers that concluded 53 minutes ago, is the most significant restructuring of Middle Eastern security architecture since the Carter Doctrine of 1980 declared the Persian Gulf a vital American interest worth defending with military force. That doctrine is now effectively retired, not by American choice, by Gulf choice. The nations that American strategy spent 5 decades protecting, arming, and positioning as the anchors of its regional influence have just announced that they are building their own security framework for the Strait of Hormuz, structured around Gulf leadership, funded by Gulf resources, and deliberately designed to operate independently of NATO command structures that those same nations have concluded are no longer focused on the Gulf in any meaningful operational sense. The announcement came in the form of a joint communiqué issued simultaneously from Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, Doha, Kuwait City, and Muscat. It described the establishment of the Gulf Maritime Security Compact, a new collective defense arrangement specifically governing naval operations and security protocols in the Strait of Hormuz and the broader Persian Gulf waterway. It named a joint command structure headquartered in Abu Dhabi. It outlined a shared naval patrol framework funded by member contributions. And in the line that will be quoted in diplomatic cables and defense assessments for the next decade, it described the compact as a sovereign Gulf initiative that welcomes cooperation with international partners on terms defined by Gulf member states. Not Washington, not Brussels, not NATO headquarters. The State Department has issued no response. The Pentagon has issued no response. The White House has issued no response. In the 53 minutes since that communique went public, the institutions of American power that built the regional architecture being replaced have said nothing. And that silence is the loudest confirmation available that what just happened was not expected, was not coordinated with Washington in advance, and does not have a prepared American answer. In this breakdown, we are going to trace exactly how this moment was built. We are going to go inside the security vacuum that NATO's eastward focus created in the Gulf and explain why Gulf capitals stopped waiting for Washington to notice it. We are going to reconstruct the summit that produced this morning's communique and explain what was said in the room that never appeared in the public statement. We are going to examine what America actually lost when its most reliable regional partners stopped treating American protection as an automatic given. And we are going to answer the question that defense ministries from London to Beijing are processing right now with great urgency. If Gulf allies have replaced NATO's focus in Hormuz, who actually protects the strait? And what does a Persian Gulf without American strategic primacy look like for the rest of the world? Pay close attention, because this shift did not happen overnight. It was built from a series of moments that Washington noticed and then chose not to act on, until acting on them was no longer Washington's decision to make. 3 years ago, NATO's Strategic Compass, the alliance's foundational planning document for the decade ahead, identified 3 primary security challenges: Russian aggression in Europe, Chinese strategic competition in the Indo-Pacific, and the internal cohesion of the alliance itself, strained by years of burden-sharing disputes and political divergence among member states. The Persian Gulf did not appear in that document as a primary security focus. The Strait of Hormuz was referenced once in a paragraph about energy security implications of regional instability, without any accompanying commitment to specific operational engagement or resource allocation. Gulf state defense ministries read that document, they read it carefully, and they understood what its emissions communicated as clearly as they understood its stated priorities. NATO was looking east toward Russia. NATO was looking further east toward China. The Gulf was something NATO mentioned in energy security footnotes. The security guarantee that Gulf capitals had spent decades building their strategic postures around had not been formally withdrawn. It had simply been redirected. And a security guarantee that is redirected is, for practical operational purposes, a security guarantee that is gone. The timing of that redirection was not accidental. Russia's escalation in Ukraine in early 2022 produced an immediate and complete reorientation of NATO's operational focus and resource commitment toward the European theater. American military assets, intelligence bandwidth, Diplomatic attention and political capital flowed eastward in volumes that left the Gulf with a level of American strategic attention that career diplomats in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi described privately as the lowest they had observed in their professional lifetimes. American officials kept making reassuring statements about the enduring American commitment to Gulf security. They kept sending those statements from Washington, while the operational reality in the region told a different story. Gulf states are practical governments. They watch what militaries do, not what diplomats say, and what they watched over 36 months of European-focused NATO operations was a persistent structural reduction in the American military presence and operational tempo in the Gulf that no reassuring statement could explain away. The signal was clear. Washington's attention had a new primary address, and the Gulf was going to have to make alternative arrangements. The Riyadh summit that produced this morning's communiqué did not begin today. It began 14 months ago as a series of bilateral defense consultations that Saudi Arabia initiated, starting with the UAE, then Qatar, then Kuwait, then Oman. Each consultation used the same framing: not anti-American, not confrontational, simply practical. If the operational security environment in the Gulf required Gulf states to carry a larger share of their own defense burden, what would that architecture look like? What capabilities would it require? What command structure would it need? What legal framework would govern collective action? Those questions were asked quietly, answered carefully, and transformed over 14 months into the framework that was announced 53 minutes ago. 14 months of preparation, not a single leak, not a single warning to Washington that this was coming. Because the decision had been made early in that 14-month process that informing Washington in advance would produce American pressure to slow, modify, or halt an initiative that Gulf capitals had decided was necessary for their own strategic survival. At 11:15 in the evening local time, the night before the public announcement, the final summit session concluded in a private facility outside Riyadh. The participants were defense ministers and senior military commanders from all 5 compact member states. According to a source with knowledge of the session's substance, the final discussion before the vote on the communiqué text was not about the framework itself. The framework had been agreed weeks earlier. The final discussion was about the American relationship and how to manage Washington's response to an announcement that would arrive without preparation or consultation. One defense minister, according to this source, said something that the room received in silence. He said that the measure of how necessary this compact was could be found in the fact that none of them had felt they could tell their most important external partner that it was being built. A room full of men who had spent careers in American-trained military institutions, who had attended American war colleges and run American-supplied equipment and participated in American-led exercises for decades, sat in silence after that observation. Then they voted unanimously to release the communiqué in the morning. While that vote was being cast in Riyadh, Washington was asleep. No warning, no preparation, no chance to intervene. The decision was complete before the people it most affected had any opportunity to shape it. The morning briefing that landed on senior American officials' desks alongside the communiqué text described the Gulf Maritime Security Compact in terms that sources inside the relevant agencies described as clinical and uncomfortable. Clinical because the assessment confirmed what the communiqué stated without finding any factual error in it. Uncomfortable because every factual confirmation was simultaneously a confirmation that the strategic assumptions underlying 15 years of American Gulf policy had been overtaken by events that American policy had not moved fast enough to prevent. A senior defense official, according to a colleague present during the initial assessment meeting, kept returning to one specific element of the compact's command structure. The Joint Command headquarters in Abu Dhabi will operate under a rotating chairmanship among member states. There is no provision for American liaison integration at the command level. There is a provision for international observer status. The United States, the power that built, supplied, trained, and until this morning effectively led Gulf security operations for 5 decades, has been offered observer status in the institution that replaced its leadership role. The official reportedly read that section 3 times before setting the document down. Why did the Gulf states make this move with this specific structure at this specific moment? Follow the security logic, because the pattern of the past 36 months tells the story that no official statement will tell directly. Saudi Arabia's strategic posture has been transforming for several years under a leadership that has demonstrated consistent willingness to make decisions that American officials find uncomfortable. The diplomatic opening toward Iran in 2023, brokered by China, was the first clear signal that Riyadh was operating a foreign policy that could reach outcomes Washington preferred not to see without requiring Washington's approval to pursue them. The Abraham Accords process had demonstrated that Gulf normalization with Israel could move faster than American diplomatic frameworks anticipated, and Vision 2030, the economic transformation program that has become the defining national project of Saudi strategic culture, requires a stable regional security environment that cannot be held hostage to the fluctuating attention of an external guarantor whose domestic political cycles produce unpredictable foreign policy commitments. The UAE's calculation runs parallel but distinct. Abu Dhabi has spent a decade building defense industry independence, acquiring advanced systems from multiple suppliers, developing indigenous military production capability, and positioning itself as a regional military power in its own right, rather than simply a host for American bases. The Gulf Maritime Security Compact formalizes what the UAE's defense investments had already been building toward operationally. A Gulf in which Abu Dhabi's military capability is institutionally central rather than subordinate to American command architecture. The power shift this announcement creates operates on multiple levels simultaneously. At the operational level, the Strait of Hormuz will now have a security management framework that does not require American authorization to function. At the political level, every Gulf state government has demonstrated that its relationship with Washington is a partnership of choice rather than a dependency of necessity. At the symbolic level, the Carter Doctrine's 50-year claim that the Persian Gulf is a vital American interest worth defending with American military force has been answered by the Gulf's own claim that it is a vital Gulf interest worth defending with Gulf military force. Here is the cascade that is now moving through the global system faster than any diplomatic process can manage. If the Gulf Maritime Security Compact establishes operational credibility in its first months, every conversation about American basing rights in member states changes character. The bases do not close immediately, but the terms on which they remain open shift. An American military presence that was once the foundation of Gulf security becomes one element in a Gulf-managed security environment. The landlord has changed. The tenant's rights are subject to renegotiation. While Washington is processing that implication, NATO headquarters in Brussels is processing a different version of the same problem. The alliance's credibility as a global security framework rests substantially on the perception that its members and partners remain aligned with its strategic priorities. Gulf states have been NATO partners in various formats for years, participating in exercises, sharing intelligence, purchasing alliance standard equipment. This morning's announcement does not formally break those relationships, but it establishes an alternative institutional framework that operates on Gulf terms, answers to Gulf leadership, and pursues Gulf strategic objectives that may or may not align with NATO's priorities in any given situation. While Brussels absorbs that implication, Tehran is absorbing a completely different one. Iran has spent decades positioning itself as the primary challenger to American-led security in the Gulf. The Gulf Maritime Security Compact does not include Iran, but it also does not define Iran as an automatic adversary. The communiqué's language about cooperative engagement with regional stakeholders is carefully constructed to leave diplomatic space for a relationship with Tehran that is managed by Gulf states rather than filtered through American hostility. For Iran, a Gulf security framework that it is not in, but that is also not automatically against it, is a fundamentally different strategic environment than the American-led framework it has spent 40 years treating as an existential threat. While Tehran is calculating, Beijing is noting that the compact's equipment procurement provisions list preferred suppliers for its joint naval patrol assets. The list includes American suppliers. It also includes European suppliers. It also includes, with equal standing, suppliers from countries that do not share American export control frameworks. China's defense industry has invested heavily in Gulf relationships for exactly this kind of moment, when Gulf states making independent security decisions are also making independent procurement decisions. The compact creates procurement opportunity that American sanctions regimes and technology transfer restrictions would have limited under the previous arrangement. Inside the American national security establishment, sources describe a debate that is moving between two positions, neither of which is comfortable. The first position holds that Washington should respond to the compact with a clear demonstration of continued commitment, increased military presence, senior diplomatic engagement, and a reassertion of the American role that the communiqué has edged aside. The second position holds that a heavy-handed American response to a sovereign security initiative by governments that Washington has spent decades calling its closest regional partners would accelerate the distancing it is designed to prevent. One official, according to a source familiar with the debate, described the choice as picking between appearing desperate and appearing indifferent with no visible path to appearing necessary. The compact's architects understood this dilemma when they designed the announcement. The communique's welcoming language about international cooperation was crafted specifically to deny Washington a clean confrontational response. You cannot object loudly to a framework that says it welcomes you as a partner. You can only accept the terms on which the welcome is offered. And those terms, as the communique makes clear, are Gulf terms. So where does this leave the Persian Gulf tonight? The Strait of Hormuz will have its first indigenously Gulf-led security management framework operational within 90 days, according to the compact's implementation timeline. American military assets currently based in Gulf member states remain in place, but under an umbrella of Gulf sovereignty that has just been asserted at institutional scale in a way it never was before. The energy supply chains that move 21% of the world's daily oil consumption through those 21 miles of water will transit under the operational watch of a security compact that Washington did not design, did not approve, and did not see coming until it was already done. NATO's focus has been replaced in Hormuz, not by hostility, not by a sudden rupture, by something more durable than either of those, by a decision made quietly over 14 months, by practical governments that concluded their security was too important to leave entirely in the hands of an alliance whose attention had drifted to a different ocean. The 50-year era of American strategic primacy in the Persian Gulf did not end with a confrontation. It ended with a communique, polite, formal, legally careful, and absolute in its implications. The phone call that would have gone to Washington went to Riyadh instead. And the Gulf states that made that call are not asking for American approval of what they decided on it. What is your read on where this goes next? Does Washington have a response that can actually rebuild the strategic centrality it has lost in the Gulf? Or has the moment for that response already passed? Drop your honest analysis in the comments. Subscribe. The first formal American government response to the Gulf Maritime Security Compact is going to tell us everything about whether Washington understands what just happened or is still trying to manage a reality that has already moved past its management. The moment that response lands, we are on it immediately. The rules of the Gulf just changed, and this time Gulf states wrote them themselves.